So, what happens when a seemingly simple home renovation plan, to make a little more room for a growing family, spirals into a year-long, document-heavy legal nightmare? Well, that's what we're digging into today. This is a story about rules, responsibility, and the razor-thin difference between what you think the HOA is asking for and what the fine print actually says.
And this quote from the homeowner, Ryan McMahon, wow, it just says it all, right? You can feel the frustration here. He was completely convinced that no matter what he did, no matter what proof he provided, the answer was always going to be no. So how on earth did we get to this point?
All right, let's set the scene. Meet Ryan McMahon and his fiancée. They own two separate condo units in the same building, one right on top of the other. And with their family growing, they had this great idea. Let's combine them into one big two-story home.
Now, we're not just talking about knocking down a wall here. This was a major project. The plan was to completely remove the floor between the two units to build an internal staircase. And here's the crucial part. They wanted to add a brand new bathroom on each level. That meant some serious structural and, you guessed it, plumbing work.
So for this first part, let's walk through this whole ordeal from Mr. McMahon's point of view. For him, this was an entire year of doing everything he thought was right, providing documents, answering questions, only to run into a solid brick wall, over and over again.
And this timeline, man, it just lays out the whole frustrating journey. He submits the request in January. 4 months later, denied. Then in early June, a little glimmer of hope, they issue a preliminary approval, but it comes with a list of conditions. And then just a few weeks later, bam, another denial. The reasons keep changing until a full year after he started, he gets the final no.
You can just imagine the whiplash. First, the HOA says they're worried about structural integrity. Okay. Then it's about the building and the piping system. Then they get really specific. The pipes are from the 1960s and they're too old. And finally, they just land on this vague reason that the information he sent over just isn't sufficient. For McMahon, it must have felt like the goalposts weren't just moving, they were on a different field entirely.
And in response to every single one of these changing concerns, Mr. McMahon comes back with a mountain of paperwork. He gets professional architectural plans. He gets a letter from a structural engineer saying the project is safe. He gets a super detailed assessment from a licensed plumbing company. He even goes down to the city and pulls the records to prove the pipes were updated in the 2000s, not the 60s like the board claimed.
And you can hear it in this email, right? This is him at the end of his rope. After all of that, after providing stacks of evidence, he felt like he had jumped through every hoop they put in front of him, and that this was no longer about safety, it was personal.
But of course, that's only one side of the story. So let's flip this whole thing around and look at it from the HOA's perspective. For them, this wasn't about one homeowner. It was about their duty to protect the entire community from what could be a very expensive disaster.
Remember, the board is made up of volunteer residents, his neighbors, and they argued they have a legal fiduciary duty to everyone. They were genuinely worried about the building's structural integrity, the old sewer lines, and hey, if they approve this, what's to stop 10 other people from wanting to do the same thing? They saw their job as protecting everyone from potential damage and massive repair bills down the line.
And this right here is the absolute heart of the entire legal battle. The HOA's whole defense came down to these tiny but incredibly important details. Their conditional approval letter specifically asked for an engineer to sign off on the plumbing. McMahon provided a letter from a licensed plumbing company. Now, to you and me, that might sound like the same thing, but legally, they are worlds apart.
The HOA's argument was actually pretty simple. They basically said, look, we're your neighbors. We're volunteers on the board. We are not engineers. We're not contractors. And because of that, they couldn't just interpret documents or assume things were okay. They needed exactly what they asked for, down to the letter, to feel confident they were making the right call for the whole community.
So, after a full year of this agonizing back and forth, the whole dispute ends up where these things often do, in a formal hearing in front of an administrative law judge. Both sides got to lay out their case, their evidence, and their frustrations. So, what do you think? After all that, who won? Was it the homeowner, who provided stacks of expert documents to prove his case? Or was it the volunteer HOA board, who insisted that those documents weren't exactly what their letter required?
The judge sided with the HOA, and the reason is spelled out clear as day, right here in the official decision. The judge found that Mr. McMahon, despite all his efforts, had not fully complied with the very specific terms laid out in that one crucial document, the preliminary approval letter.
Let's break down exactly how the judge got there.
First, he looked at that approval letter and basically treated it like a contract. It had clear, specific conditions. Second, the key condition was that an engineer, a licensed professional engineer, had to sign off on the plumbing. Third, what the homeowner submitted was a letter from a plumbing company. A very reputable one, for sure, but not an engineering firm. And so the conclusion was simple. Because he didn't provide exactly what was asked for, he failed to meet his side of the bargain.
So, why does any of this matter to the rest of us? Well, if you live in a condo or any community with an HOA, this story is packed with some incredibly important and potentially very expensive lessons.
It all boils down to a critical legal idea called the burden of proof. What that means is, in a dispute like this, it is not the HOA's job to prove that your project is unsafe. It is 100% the homeowner's job. It's your job to provide crystal clear evidence that you have met every single one of their requirements to the letter.
So what are the big takeaways here? 3 simple rules. 1. Read the fine print. Words like company versus engineer aren't just details. They can be the things that sink your entire project. 2. If you get a list of conditions, you have to treat it like a checklist from Mission Control. You have to satisfy every single item exactly as it's written. And 3, and this is a big one, don't assume the board will connect the dots for you. The burden is on you to make your case loud and clear.
And that really leaves us with one final thought. Put yourself in Mr. McMahon's shoes. You're getting denied over and over again. After hearing all this, what's your next move? Do you go back over every single word of every document with a magnifying glass, hoping to find that one little mistake? Or do you just decide it's time to bite the bullet and hire a lawyer? It's a tough call, and as we saw today, the consequences can be huge.